Welcome to Fitness Casual. Real results come from more clarity, not more effort. Here we're talking about hormone balancing foods. You know, most women are told that their only options are birth control or hormone replacement or just living with the symptoms, Kat. And so it just keeps stacking up, right? PMS, low energy, stubborn weight, cravings, all the stuff we're going to cover today. And you don't have to live with it. The truth is daily diet is actually one of the most powerful hormone balancing tools that any woman can do. And whether it's estrogen dominance, insulin resistance, nutrition is the first line of defense, but it's something that most people don't have advice on, either just from growing up or from their doctor. And it works better than any quick fix. So that's really what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through 9 healthy foods that support your hormones naturally. So I'm Andrew Hayes, and with me is the very balanced Kat Best.
Hello.
Kat, we're going to cover macros a little bit today. It's obviously more complex than that, and we're going to get really specific. But if you had to pick a macro, protein, carb, fat, you have a favorite one that you would wear a t-shirt to support or something?
I do, and it's fats. It's not
Wow.
protein. A lot of people probably thought it was going to be protein. I love fats. I love fats so much because I used to really not eat any of them, and I thought they were bad. I didn't understand, the same way a lot of people are like, fats are bad. Also, when I was a vegetarian, a lot of that was stemmed from cholesterol being demonic. So I think my relationship with fats has come so far, and I probably have tripled my fat intake over the years. I love eating them. I feel amazing eating fats. I love nuts and seeds, nut butters, avocado, olive oil, all of those things. I found personally made a big difference in how I felt. And yes, protein's great, but I think fats are just my personal favorite. And I also love seeing when people start eating more fats, how great they feel. Protein's obvious, but fats is a little sneaky powerhouse that a lot of people don't think about, but it really shines in the hormone department.
People either don't think about it, or it's still that myth of fat equals getting fat, low fat craze, which was really big in the 90s, which we're still kind of climbing out of that hole, how detrimental that was, which we did an episode on too in our cholesterol episode. I love that answer. We're going to come back to that answer because we're going to talk a lot about fats today.
Yep.
I'm going to go with carbs, partly obvious because they're delicious, but also because listen, you can survive without carbohydrates. If you're going to come at me, the keto zealots are going to be like, you don't need a carb to survive. It's okay, true, but you also can survive in nature with a tarp and no clothes. We're not talking about just living for the sake of living. We're talking about enjoying your life. And Kat and I are both examples, and millions of other people are examples of people who eat carbs every day and enjoy the food that they eat and get to enjoy indulgences and still be really healthy, right? And I'm not just saying how you look, I'm talking about blood work and energy and all. Carbs are actually often tied to that, right? It's a really important part of being healthy, whether you can survive without it or not. And so I would like to see almost everybody, with rare exceptions, incorporate carbs into their life. I'm here to defend carbs.
Yep.
And yes, it's a spectrum, of course. I'm not saying eat cake for breakfast every day. That probably won't go well for you, but you shouldn't be fearing rice and fruit and all these things that are vilified for really no reason. Plus pizza, beer, why not? There's a room for everything. You agree with all that, Kat?
I totally agree. I think carbs are, severely misunderstood. Same with fat, same with protein, but carbs is the one, everyone knows what carbs are. Sometimes people are like, I don't know what foods are protein, I'm not really sure what's a fat. Everyone knows what carbs are. There's a reason why.
I love bread. Wasn't that the Oprah quote from Weight Watchers? I love bread. It was yeah, that's good. I have very few good things to say about Weight Watchers, but that was good. I'm glad that they're bringing bread back. Okay, so Kat, you're going to take over in a second. I just want to make one thing really clear here, which is you don't need to be an expert on the 50 plus hormones in the human body to live optimally, right? The endocrine system is insanely complex. We think there's about 50 hormones, but we're actually not sure. Even an endocrinologist would say we're still learning. And even endocrinologists, they're not tracking every hormone every day, right? We're looking at patterns, we're looking at lifestyle, we're looking at what is the most serious issue we need to address because it's a really complex system. And so what matters for any woman listening is doing the basics consistently. And most of us were never taught the basics, right? Nutrition, sleep, movement, stress. These stabilize multiple hormones simultaneously And so, yes, there are exceptions. Yes, there's thyroid diseases. Yes, there's PCOS. But even those, again, lifestyle is really important there. So even if you need some kind of medical intervention, you still want to master these basics. So I would say this is for every single woman on the planet. Kat, this episode, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, well, two things I want to say before I get into the list. One, all whole foods in general will help balance out hormones. It is not like the keto diet or the paleo, Mediterranean, Whole30. Diets don't matter. It's the foods that you eat do, and the foods you eat could make up any sort of diet. But there's a lot of whole foods that I'm also not going to mention today, and it doesn't mean those are not good for hormones. We're just starting with like the heavy hitters, but if in general, if you're eating mostly whole foods, you're doing something right for your body and for your hormones. So if you don't want to think much beyond that, you don't really have to. But for today, I also didn't want to just give a list of foods. I wanted to explain why these foods are helpful for hormones. So I'm going to talk through a couple different drivers, which are basically the underlying reasons why hormonal imbalance could occur and how specific foods target those specific drivers. Because if you have a hormonal imbalance, it's not because you have estrogen dominance. You could, but you also might not and still have hormone issues. So we can't like pretend all hormone imbalances are the same. They're drastically different. But if you eat a lot of these foods, it's going to help kind of regardless of what you have going on, but there are some more specific ones. If you have an inkling of a specific underlying reason, but you might not, but when I go through the underlying reasons, it might resonate a little bit more. All right, so driver number one of hormonal balance is estrogen dominance. So this is essentially when estrogen builds up in the body and isn't cleared properly. This can show up as like really heavy periods, bloating, mood swings, breast tenderness, even not around your cycle. Really bad PMS definitely can be an estrogen dominance thing. And you can have your estrogen dominance confirmed by labs, but symptoms go a really long way. If you have a lot of symptoms, you don't necessarily need to prove it. And also some labs are better than others. And also this is like getting a little specific, but you could have normal estrogen and still be estrogen dominant if you don't have enough progesterone. So we don't need to have high estrogen necessarily to be dominant. It just means you have less of the others to balance it out. So it's one way to also look at it. The foods that support your estrogen metabolism and detoxification pathways really shine here. So food number one is cruciferous vegetables. These are the veggies that contain compounds that turn into DIM, which is just something that literally helps your body process estrogen into protective forms. So the more cruciferous veggies you eat, we're going to have better estrogen metabolism. These veggies also have a property or a nutrient called sulforaphane. This helps liver detox. It helps get hormones out of your body so they're not constantly recycling. If you're not getting hormones out, they will recirculate in your body and create issues like a lot of the estrogen dominant symptoms I mentioned. So these veggies, which is not just one veggie, and that's why it's great. Cruciferous veggies could be broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, I even think arugula. There's a lot. If you Google like what are cruciferous veggies, you're going to see a whole list. I would recommend you add maybe one in daily since you get a good variety, or at least a couple times a week you try to get some variety there. I'm a big like roasted cauliflower, broccoli person. But with salads like kale, cabbage, it's really easy to get these ones in. These are also very affordable, readily available. Like we all know what these veggies are. You can definitely get them in. And for me personally, I'm always trying to prioritize cruciferous veggies over other veggies for this exact reason. So if I'm like, oh, I need a veggie today, I'm always trying to make sure I have at least like one cruciferous vegetable per day with this intention in mind. Number two are nuts and seeds. So I didn't want to pick one nut or one seed because I don't like doing that, and I don't want you to think that flax is like a magical thing compared to others, but all nuts and seeds are good. However, flax specifically is packed with phytoestrogens, so these actually help balance out estrogen in the body even if it's too high or too low. So that's what kind of is really cool about flaxseed. It can just help balance estrogen out. And then other seeds like pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, they're rich in zinc. That can help your fertility, your progesterone levels, even your thyroid health. They also have magnesium, which is really good for PMS symptoms, insulin control, and like stress resilience overall. And then nuts and seeds also have fiber, which helps bind that excess estrogen in the gut, so it can clear your body. Healthy fats also reduce inflammation. So think of all of the things I just said by eating more nuts and seeds. You do not need to just only do flax, but I do think a lot of people don't eat enough seeds. They eat nuts like almonds, cashews, but seeds, because you can't really like snack on them the same. You can, but like snacking on pumpkin seeds is a little different.
Yep.
It's good because they're actually smaller. It's like better for portion control, but those you could like sprinkle on your yogurt or sprinkle on your dinner. So seeds might be something to take an intentional step to have. Flax, for example, is also a little weird in like what do you have it with. So it's good for smoothies. Like I know, Andrew, you always do ground flax.
Yeah, I was gonna say buy it ground. Do yourself a favor
Yeah.
and buy it ground.
Yeah, the whole seeds are weird. You're not really going to chew them. They're very weird. You could sprinkle them on something. It's just not going to add much to the taste. So it's kind of like, have them ground up. It's just easier. Chia seeds also you could have, but these could go on any meal. They don't require cooking, so they're incredibly efficient. So if like you don't have plenty of nuts and seeds in your diet, it is a no-brainer to just add them in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, there's such a vilification of things that are shelf stable, which I think is often the case, right? Crackers and chips and baked goods and all of that. If something can sit for weeks without going bad, you should question it, but that's not always the case. And nuts and seeds are a great example of you can stock up on all of those one time and keep them for the year.
Oh yeah.
And so like one of my favorite protein shakes, and obviously I know I'm a man, but this applies to everybody, is like most of what I put in my smoothie is shelf stable, but also whole foods. So flax seeds, chia seeds, oats, things like that are really good staples to have in your pantry that don't require constantly going to the grocery store and stocking up your fridge, which a lot of other healthy fats require.
Yeah, and I think this is an area where people may complain about price or like things are expensive. I get that, but if you're buying like in bulk, buy a lot at once. Don't get the fanciest brand. You don't need it. They can be pretty affordable. And also, you're not going through them super fast. You're not replenishing them each week. So,
right.
Yeah, maybe a bag of Brazil nuts is $15, but you're going to have that for a really long time.
You have two per day or something.
Yeah, you're going to have that for forever. Same with flax. Like, also, one note on ground flax, it's a fantastic replacement for breadcrumbs or like flour filling in like meatballs, meatloaf, even pancakes. I'll put it in. So you can really use ground flax as almost like a flour anytime you need some sort of binder. I'll even put it on coat like chicken tenders with it, make them nice and crispy. So there's a lot you can do with flax. It's very good in that regard. And if you need ideas, just Google it. You'll see a million things. But that's another good reason to have that one, is it can replace a lot of refined flour that you wouldn't want to be having to balance your hormones.
Yep.
All right, so next driver here for hormone imbalance is insulin resistance. So high insulin levels can disrupt ovulation, definitely can contribute to PCOS or worsen PCOS if you have it. And we did a whole PCOS episode, so we know a lot of women have it or are undiagnosed. Or if you're struggling with really stubborn fat gain, you might actually have some of this going on underlying the surface. Insulin resistance is incredibly common for people who struggle with losing weight. It also will fuel cravings, it will fuel belly fat gain, and it can make disease progression worse. So having insulin resistance is not good. It's probably one of the most common underlying drivers. Also for men, this is not a female specific thing, but for women, this can really be wreaking some havoc. So foods to prioritize. One, we have berries. Berries are phenomenal. They have anthocyanins, which improve insulin sensitivity, and that's a compound that's why they have their dark color. They're really rich in blue, blackberries, raspberries. They also have a ton of antioxidants. Antioxidants help protect your ovaries and literally everything else in your body from oxidative stress. So all of the stressful lifestyles or environmental toxins, all your skincare stuff, cleaning products, all the things that are actually breaking down your cells in real time, antioxidants help combat that. And it's really all you can do to combat oxidative stress is eat a lot of antioxidants. So berries are fantastic for that. They also have a lot of fiber. So that supports your gut health, supports your detoxification, slows down blood sugar absorption. So having berries is probably one of the top foods we recommend in general because it's also easy. And who doesn't like berries? I rarely meet someone who's not or can't do frozen berries in a shake. Like there's usually some way to add them in. Everyone likes them. I know kids love berries for whatever reason. They like
kids just
crush
they put me
berries.
like it's almost bankrupt me with how much they love berries. But
and
fruit is a common misconception. A lot of people, a lot of diets tell you avoid fruit. A lot of influencers like that talk track. So I get it. I think you're right. Everyone loves it, but also some people are still really confused. Even in our program, they're like, "Can I eat fruit?" Common question.
Totally. And usually my answer to that is you don't need fruit, but I love berries. So if we're going to have one, start with berries. Like I don't think anyone needs to eat a banana every day, but a lot of people do because they just do. Like bananas have this weird, But for berries, I'm like, we have a lot more going on with berries and they're pretty low calorie. Like you can't overeat on berries. It's not going to happen, but you can undereat. And I'm just going to say, because once I actually like measured and weighed out berries, I was like, oh, I have to get a good amount to get 4 ounces. And I usually, I do 4 ounces in my breakfast. It's a good amount. And I like weighing it out because otherwise, like I might be not enough. And it's like a full serving. I see a lot of people like in food logs log a cup of berries. And I'll see a photo, I'm like, that's not a cup. A cup is a lot. If we think about a cup of blueberries, it's a lot of blueberries. It's not like 5 to 10 blueberries. You have to be eating a lot. So I also think weighing those out one time on a scale to measure in ounces or grams is very insightful. Otherwise, just aim for like a half a cup to 1 cup. But don't just put like a couple berries on your yogurt and think it's going to do much. It's not. We need like a full serving size here. And that could be blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, blackberries. You have a lot of options there. Frozen, fresh, whatever. Like there's a lot of ways to have berries. So I think those are like always a fantastic choice. All right, next we have our whole grains. So whole grains are really good for insulin resistance because fiber slows down the glucose spikes, which also helps, reduce that estrogen recirculation when we have good digestion with the fiber. A lot of whole grains have B vitamins, which are really important for hormones. Some examples here could be like oats, quinoa, barley, buckwheat. We have a lot. Like I am mostly gluten-free, so that's the ones I stick to. But just because if you're gluten-free doesn't mean you can't have grains. Grains that won't have much fiber would be like rice. White rice, for example, like doesn't have much fiber. But if we do like oats, that's a really good one. Quinoa, millet, like those are all good. I think a lot of people are afraid of those foods because they are carby. They're very carb rich. Like we mentioned earlier, carbs are important. It's just the sources that you are having. And if you have a bunch of quinoa or buckwheat, for example, you're going to get a ton of fiber, a little bit of protein too, a lot of B vitamins. So these foods are good to incorporate in for your carbohydrate source.
I know there's a common question here about whole grains, I think is abused by the packaged food industry. Do you have any guideline? Obviously, like in its most pure form, millet, things like that, but a lot of people don't buy that. If you see bread, fortify, that kind of stuff, what's a good guideline for people trying to find whole grains without being duped?
Yeah, this is definitely really tricky because even bread labels, it'll be like whole wheat something, and then right away it's like, and then white wheat, enriched wheat, like all, so it's like a little bit of something. I think if you look for sprouted products, that's good. Or you should, I think one thing is also like you could be able to see the grain in there, like see the seeds. That could be good, like visually, like you can see it in there. But that definitely is a very tricky area. But I would just look at the nutrition label to see what else is in this product. And if it's a very short ingredient list, like even wheat, like I'm not mad at that, but if it's, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a whole grain because it's refined and broken down. And yeah, this is definitely like a lot of cereals will be like whole grains in there. Like that's just, it is really complicated, but I think if we're looking for as close to the original source that food came from the earth, that is like the best thing to look for. But it's definitely a tricky department.
Yep, that's helpful.
All right, food number 5 here are legumes. So a lot of people don't know what legumes are. They think they're like beans only, but legumes would be like lentils, chickpeas, beans. Peanuts are actually a legume, so I guess I'll count it for this. It's not really where I was thinking. But legumes provide a lot of plant protein, so that's good. And they also have soluble fiber, so that helps blunt the blood sugar spikes. Fiber, like I mentioned a million times, good for detoxification. Legumes also have a lot of magnesium that support your insulin signaling and iron even availability in the body. And if I were to pick one from this list, I'm a big lentil fan. I think lentils are highly underutilized because they're a little boring, they're a little mushy, they're texture wise, some people are not into them, but I'm a big fan of like a cold lentil salad. So cook them, put them in the fridge so they're cold, and then make it into like a bean salad situation. Lentils are like the highest protein legume you can find. And I see people who like, you can actually have a meal that does not have meat if we have a lot of lentils in there, because you can get a lot of protein. And you're also going to get good carbs and lots of fiber. So they are like very powerful, and they're dirt cheap. They cost nothing. They're like the least expensive thing in the store. So get lots of lentils, but think of your hormones when you're doing that. But also like chickpeas, beans, like there's so much you can do with those foods. They're so versatile, million different ways you can eat them. So I always have like a can of some sort of beans on hand if I need like a little starch boost, or, you know, I just want something a little hearty that's also plant-based. Like they're a really good option for that.
Yeah, I was just going to add, as a busy parent myself who's, you know, not much of a chef, you can buy chickpeas in a can, you can buy pre-cooked lentils, you can buy the minute rice. Generally speaking, that's fine, Kat, right? You don't need to be soaking lentils or soaking your own beans for 12 hours. It's just not realistic unless that's really what you're into. Just make it easy on yourself. It's still a whole food, more or less.
Yep. I get these little lentiful cups. That's the brand. They're like little cups that you add hot. It's almost like oatmeal. You either add hot water or like you can microwave it. And then the lentils are flavored. So it'll be like coconut curry, whatever flavor you can think of, like chili. They have all these fun flavors, and that's ready in like 2 minutes or less. So like those are really good if you're like, I want to try lentils, but I'm not interested in making them myself. All right, so third driver of hormonal imbalance is inflammation. We did an inflammation episode. Inflammation is like a root cause of a lot of things we talk about. But on the hormonal front, it can definitely worsen your period cramps, worsen PMS symptoms in general. It can make your perimenopause symptoms feel drastically worse. It can make endometriosis feel worse. Like any condition you have, even if it's like PCOS, something with your ovaries, inflammation is going to make that worse, so you feel worse. So this is more about like you feeling bad because of the inflammation, but inflammation itself will stress out the body. If cortisol is high, it's going to impact your sex hormones. So, you know, there's a million ways inflammation plays a role here, and you have to try to address the underlying sources of inflammation, but you need to give your body the resources to fight it. Your body cannot just like magically create everything it needs to combat inflammation. You have to eat the foods that help do that. So a couple recommendations. One would be fatty fish. Obviously, salmon is great. It doesn't need to be salmon. It could be like sardines or mackerel, but it's not any fish. It's really cold water fatty fish because it's rich in omega-3s. These omega-3s help reduce the inflammatory prostaglandins that fuel inflammation. They also make pain worse. They make cyst growth more intense. So if you have really bad cramps, which some women just have horrible cramps, if you eat more omega-3s, it could be really helpful there. And it will just calm down systemic inflammation in general. But on the fertility front, which let's talk about like, you know, hormonal imbalance, a lot of women discover it because they're trying to get pregnant and they're having a hard time. And then that's really rough for women to go through. But if you eat a lot of omega-3s, it will improve your egg quality, can help the whole uterine environment in general, supporting conception. And if anyone were to come to me and they're like, I want to improve my fertility, I would be like, omega-3s now, today, because that can be really helpful. So that's just one good thing. But in general, omega-3s are hard to get, but you should be trying to get salmon about 2 times a week. Sardines, if you can handle it. I can. Mackerel, like all those things are great for you. And I feel like salmon's the most obvious one for people, but I'm not even going to mention the plant-based omega-3s because they don't move the needle nearly as much, but you know, walnuts, like that's fine. But you really want to be getting like the real deal with the foods themselves. And then food number 7 for inflammation are fermented foods. So fermented foods help support your microbiome diversity. There's actually something called the estrobolome. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
That's fun to say.
But it's like the microbiome of estrogen. So I just learned about this. I think it's like a really fun word, but it's like just goes to show like everything has its own microbiome pretty much. And there's a bacteria that helps regulate estrogen. And if you eat more fermented foods, it can help support that pathway. This will reduce systemic inflammation if you improve gut diversity. A lot of inflammation stems from having poor diversity in the gut. So food doesn't break down properly over time. You're not digesting things well. So you're eating foods, not absorbing the nutrients, creates a whole sort of issue chain there. But if we have a lot of fermented foods, we can really support the gut. And fermented foods, good ones would be like kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt is good, some cottage cheese, but not most. Miso even is a good one. Kombucha is okay. Some kombucha is loaded up with sugar, so just like look for that. But I would say if you're like, I don't really like kombucha, don't drink it. Just go for like kefir or like, sauerkraut on your meal. I think that's a better use of that. But I want to preface this by saying if you have histamine intolerance or you get really itchy or you drink wine and you feel like shit after, maybe fermented foods might have an opposite effect. So I know that's confusing advice, but there is a lot of women when there's hormonal imbalance, histamine intolerance or histamine imbalance could be an underlying driver in which having more fermented foods is only going to backfire. So that's also why everything is it depends. But for most people, if we don't have that going on, fermented foods will be more helpful for you, but pay attention to how you feel afterwards when you eat them. Do you feel worse? Do you get itchy? Because that could be another piece of feedback your body's giving you too. All right, the last driver we have here for hormone imbalance are low raw materials. So hormones are not made out of thin air. Your body needs raw materials like fats, vitamins, and minerals to synthesize and regulate estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and thyroid hormones. Again, we're not going to get into all the hormones, but estrogen on its own is not like on an island. It's dependent on how all the other ones are doing, and all of your hormones are made from the same raw materials. And when women eat ultra low fat diets or they skip nutrient dense foods, maybe they're deficient in vitamin D, B vitamins, choline, hormone production and balance will suffer. At like the cellular level, your body will not be able to make hormones the same if we're not eating the foods to provide those materials. So food number 8 is avocado. Avocado, and I love fats because I talked about it earlier, and this is where when it comes to like the cellular part of hormones, fats really shine. Avocado are rich in the monounsaturated fats, and these are a part of the building blocks of steroid hormones. They're full of potassium, which can help bloating and fluid retention, especially around your luteal phase. They have vitamin E, which is really good for tissue repair, fighting oxidative stress. It's even good for skin, wrinkles, elasticity. They have folate, which is really important for hormones, and they have a lot of fiber. So avocado is like one of the biggest, I think, superfoods we could ever find. I eat like almost one per day because I love them so much, but I also like love how they taste, but I love what they do for me. And I think avocados are just so uniquely powerful that they really deserve a place in a lot of people's diet. And you don't need to be afraid of them being too high in calorie. No avocado is going to make you fat, but if you eat like multiple per day or your calories overall are just high, then yes, you could gain weight, but it's not because of an avocado. And if you want to like make room in your calories and macros for avocado, it's not that hard. But if you're keeping room for all the other stuff or your sweet treat that you need to have every single day, maybe we're not having room for avocado. So like those are little tweaks to make because avocado is very powerful.
And don't forget, given the calorie, given the nutrient density, given the fiber content, it is filling. And so sometimes it can feel counterintuitive to add it to your day, but it can actually help with things like cravings, which a lot of people think are just like, oh, I have a sweet tooth. But actually, if you eat that avocado, you might get more of the nutrients that you're missing and might be less likely to open the bag of Cheez-Its or whatever.
Yeah, totally. And if you don't like avocado, you don't need to have it, but it's just one of those things a lot of people can find some way to fit it in. And then I've also had people be like, I don't buy avocados because then they're too ripe by the time I need it and I can't eat it in time. Put it in your fridge. When my avocados are basically ripe or on the very verge of being where I want them to be, you put it in the crisper drawer of your fridge and they will last days. I don't know why people aren't doing that, but you don't need to leave them out until they rot on your countertop. Like there is a window of time. Maybe you need to pay more attention, but don't tell me because your avocados go rotten too quick, that's not a reason not to eat them. I'm sorry.
I do the same thing. I put it next to the bananas if they're really
Yeah.
they're really green, next to the bananas, and then once they're ready, put them in the fridge. I get
Yep.
like a week, almost a week out of them.
Totally. Yeah, you
Yeah.
get a lot. You get a lot. All right, last food for raw materials are eggs. Cannot even express how powerful eggs are. Cholesterol is the precursor to all hormones. You know, your cell membranes are made of cholesterol, your hormones are made from cholesterol. It's incredibly important. So eggs provide a good amount of cholesterol, you know, and really healthy fats and a lot of vitamins. They have choline, which is actually very good for liver detoxification, and clearing excess estrogen. That's also why these are very good for pregnancy, for like getting pregnant. Like eggs are very good for that. Vitamin D, eggs have vitamin D. Deficiency in vitamin D is linked to irregular cycles, low fertility, mood issues, like any disease we can think of. Low vitamin D is probably correlated to it. And not many foods actually have vitamin D in them, so this one's a little unique on that front. It has a lot of B vitamins that help support ovulation, energy production, and stress resilience. And a lot of people are really concerned about eating too many eggs from the cholesterol side of things. Not worried about that, and especially if if everything else is okay, or your triglycerides are not off the charts, you're not eating a ton of saturated fat, we don't have too much to be worried about when it comes to eggs, because they have so many other health properties. But you could also, if you eat like one egg per day, it's probably helpful, but when you have eggs, have like a couple to get like an actual good serving, get enough protein, get enough fats there. But there's no specific amount of eggs you need to eat every day for hormone health, but just maybe try to have them a couple times a week. We don't need to go crazy, but get them in there in some way. There's a million different ways to eat eggs too. Very versatile. But as far as proteins go, the only ones I've really mentioned here were eggs and fatty fish, but other proteins are great. It's impossible to really come up with 9 of the best hormone foods, right? That's a really hard thing. But you see here, as I just listed all foods you've heard of, right? I didn't say any food no one's not heard of. And they're all pretty simple to get. Nothing crazy here, nothing super expensive. These are just basic, simple whole foods that can really do a lot. But now that I also explained like why certain foods support your body, that's also how I want people to think about nutrition. I understand, like, I nerd out on this stuff. It really excites me to know all the functional properties of food. But part of understanding nutrition and like having a baseline education is also knowing that foods do specific things for your body based on the nutrients they provide. So if you want to fix an underlying hormonal imbalance, we have to eat the right foods to give your body what it needs. And that's really how functional nutrition, like what it's based upon, is like nutrient in food that help your body do what it needs to do. So we cannot go to any other thing like birth control or HRT or whatever if we're not also addressing the raw materials that your body needs to balance out hormones naturally. If you do go down a medication route, these could help amplify the results of that, but I think it's a totally missed opportunity if people don't think about the dietary changes they need to make in addition to all the other things.
Yeah, it's such an important point. If you're listening to this, you might really be struggling, right? Either with something that has a formal diagnosis, or maybe you have unclear causes and you just have symptoms. And maybe you've been to the doctor, maybe you've been to multiple doctors and you're just not feeling good. And Kat, we were talking about this before the episode. Like, this is something that's really difficult for me as a man who runs a functional nutrition business. Like, I see women all the time who are in constant pain and have been to doctors and aren't getting what they need. And that, again, it's not like calling anyone out. It's just, I think there's so much missing in terms of daily diet and lifestyle choices that can really make a life-changing difference. And so if you don't totally trust us yet, I understand that. But Kat, I think we've lost count of like how many people have come in with PCOS and endometriosis and perimenopause, like you name it. And they're like, wow, I can't believe that all of the stuff we've worked on, just, listing 9 categories of foods, made a bigger difference than any appointment I've ever had. And again, that's, your mileage may vary. Some people have some serious conditions that require medical intervention, but this really does apply to everyone. There's no reason not to do this, no matter where you are in your journey. So trust us on this, if you agree with that.
And it's part of the reason I'm here, because I've had hormone issues for over a decade at this point. I have them right now today. Like, I am not magically healed. Like, I'm always honest and transparent, but I've come really far. But this is by far the thing that I got no answers and was just told, like, birth control. Oh, let's just change your birth control. let's just like go to a different one, or this other thing, or they wouldn't, or like I've even been told like, oh, because you're not a man, we're not that worried that one's low because it's better than it being high, right? I'm like, okay.
Yep.
But that's because like that's the answer I get, and that's why I've done so much like education into hormones and help women with this, because like my personal experience, all pathways led to this type of work at the end of the day. And that's why it's so important. I feel very passionate about it. I'm not saying like don't go to the doctor, of course not go, but just know that there's a whole subset of things to do that might not ever be mentioned in an appointment.
That's right. So if you want to try it, cruciferous vegetables, nuts and seeds, those are ideal for estrogen dominance. Berries, whole grains, legumes, those are great for insulin resistance. Again, all of these are going to cross all categories, but just recapping what Kat went over. Fatty fish, omega-3s, that can really help with inflammation. Fermented food, same thing. So kefir, how do you say it? Kefir?
I say kefir.
Kefir.
I don't know.
Kefir sounds right.
Don't
kefir,
quote me.
sauerkraut, kimchi, sometimes yogurt or cottage cheese, maybe pickled beets, one of my favorites if you count that, Kat. And then avocados, other healthy fats, eggs, things like that. So there's a lot you can do. As Kat said, we didn't say anything weird that you need to go buy at some super specialty store. You just need to incorporate these into your diet, and you don't need to necessarily even remember which category these ladder up to, right? You don't need to be a expert on every hormone or understand the science behind it. What matters is that every day you're giving the right building blocks to your body through these whole foods. And yes, maybe they're not magic bullets, but I think you'll be pretty surprised. And like, we really try this for a couple of weeks and see, because it's something we've seen time and time again. When you start with the basics, your hormones will follow.
Yeah. Pick one or three of those foods if you're not eating them. I look at this list and I'm like, I eat almost all of these in 1 week.
That's great.
And it's pretty basic, so you can do that too.
We also have a healthy hormones guide, which we'll link in the show notes. And then if you need more of Kat and all her hormone specialties and her love of avocados, you can find her on Instagram at @KatBestWellness. You can find me on Instagram at AndrewHayesLife. You can join our amazing Ulta Life community, where we have lots of other people working on integrating lifestyle, diet, nutrition, everything into their life. You can be part of a really cool community and all of the previous trainings we've done on topics like this. And we'll see you for the next one, everyone. Eat those avos.